Good afternoon, Morehouse College. Good afternoon, Morehouse College alumni. We want to thank those of you who are in the room and those of you who are listening in other ways. I'm John Sylvanus Wilson Jr., president of Morehouse College, and I want to welcome you all here. My job today is to kick off the presentations with just a few comments that will set the context for them. First, I want to talk about 5 C's here. I don't usually use acronyms or, that kind of structure, but it just came to me that way this particular time. The first 2 C's are capital and character preeminence. Those of you who have been able to take some time to look at the Dreams brochure, toward the end, there is a quote from my inaugural address. It says very simply, character preeminence means producing first-rate men, while capital preeminence means having a first-rate campus, and we will have the world of our dreams when we are recognizably and completely preeminent in both. We are in pursuit of character and capital preeminence. So those 2 C's are always going to be important. They frame our strategic plan that has been approved by the board and that we are aggressively pursuing. And so at its heart, this is about character and capital preeminence. The third C is for Campbell. As president, the most important hire I had to make was a chief academic officer. And I was very determined to have one who could engage productively with our faculty and draw from our faculty some of the best ideas that we could situate in order to strengthen Morehouse College. So I just want to validate that in Campbell, the third C, we have the right provost, and you'll see evidence of that in this presentation today. And then the final 2 C's are capital campaign. And I just want to talk about that just briefly. Having done 2 capital campaigns earlier in my career, I can tell you with confidence that the way capital campaigns the best capital campaigns are executed, they are built around strong academic initiatives. Institutions, colleges and universities have been able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars because they start off by shaping strong academic initiatives built around the best ideas of the faculty. When that happens, you attract resources, the institution elevates. You enrich the learning experience, you enrich the physical environment, you enrich the endowment. That's what this is about. I need you to know that. What you're going to see is the foundation for our movement forward. And with that, I want to get out of the way and invite Provost Campbell up here to talk about these initiatives, after which there'll be some Q&A. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to try to be quick because the more important thing is for us to have some kind of time for some conversation. My name is Kai Campbell, and what I'm going to present will be a little bit of a surface touch of things that the faculty have been talking about for quite some time, and they represent a lot of really good ideas. And so we want to get your feedback most importantly. But in the first case, in this first conversation, I want to introduce the idea of something that I've come to call Sports Plus. We've talked about it in a lot of different contexts, but it's a kind of academic initiatives that intersect, interestingly, with sports in some ways. What we're going to talk about is, I think at this stage, this particular initiative is fairly aspirational, and we're just at the beginning of these conversations. And so you'll hear just the fledgling parts of ideas here. I want to begin by playing a clip.
That's a great starting point. That's great. The title actually comes from Larry Johnson. Mm-hmm. You know Larry Johnson?
Yes, I do. Formerly of the New York Knicks.
Well, remember in 1999 when the Knicks were in the NBA championship, and Larry was boycotting the meeting, and they were fine. So fine. Said, okay, you all want me to talk? I'm going to talk. So he commenced to blast the media and all that. But one of the things he said is that the only people I care about are those brothers on the court. He pointed to the Knicks. He said, we're rebellious slaves. We're a bunch of rebellious slaves. So, of course, the next day, he was just completely massacred in the media. Well, a year later, they were playing a game. The Knicks were playing a game in Los Angeles against the Clippers.
Against the Clippers, yes.
Against the Clippers. And so during timeout, as they walked to the bench, this white fan stood up behind the Knicks bench and he said, Johnson, you're nothing but a $40 million slave. And I thought that the anecdote was interesting for two reasons. A, that this fan remembered that for a whole season, and B, that Larry Johnson chose that particular metaphor to try to describe to the media exactly how he felt. You know, that particular myth. So I want that to begin the beginning of a dialogue.
And that dialogue is what? Because you started something here. You know that.
Well,
you know that, Bill. I've known you for years, and I'm telling you right now, I was shocked by the title because I'm saying to myself, people say, you're talking about slaves and mentioning it in the same breath as multi-million-dollar athletes.
But this is the problem. See, this is the first problem. You cannot equate. See, as soon as you begin to equate money with slavery, you're wrong. I mean, you're wrong because it's a condition. There were brothers, and I went all the way on the plantation. I've been doing it for 8 years. I went all the way on the plantation. There were slaves, there were jockeys who were making lots of money. Slave jockeys. There was a brother named Charles
1700s and 1800s?
Oh, man, there was a brother named Charles Stewart who was a trainer. We're talking about 1810. This brother was a trainer. He had his owners, he was in charge of his owner's stables. At a time when black people weren't supposed to leave state without a pass, this cat had his runners, and you know what? He was making so much money, he had to hire an agent because he was making so much money. But guess what? Charles Stewart was a slave. He was sold 3 or 4 times. Only difference is he could negotiate the terms of his.
But getting back to your point, you're saying money shouldn't be associated with slavery. Is that what you're saying?
Money has nothing to do with the condition. It's the condition of slavery, not necessarily how much money you have.
All right, let me go to Armstrong Williams. You sit right next to him. What are your thoughts as you hear this, especially when he says you shouldn't identify money with slavery? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's inseparable. You know, so many people play off slavery and human slavery and the wretchedness of that. You know, in slavery, human beings, American blacks, did not have a choice. They were forced into in this kind of behavior, dehumanized, and even though the founders realized it was wrong. Athletes make a choice. Many young people spend their lives, their childhoods, preparing, wanting to be in the NBA, wanting to be in the NFL, wanting to be superstar athletes. They may not choose the right behavior. They may not have, in some instances, the right value system, but they're free. And many of them go back and empower their families, empower their communities, and they don't squander their money and their resources. I think what Mr. Roden is talking about here, something that we should talk about, is a value system that's like it. But there is no way in 2006 that you can equate athletes with slavery. There's just no comparison.
Let me bring the doctor in here. Go ahead, Doc. He said you heard what
One of the reasons for playing that clip is no matter where you fall on the scale of whether or not you believe that pro athletes are, and if you look at the NFL Combine, if you look at some of the other things that people are watching, whether or not you see a parallel to the kind of conditions of slavery is not so much the point as this is an important point for us to be engaging in conversation on. And it's a kind of conversation that I think is the kind of conversation that a Morehouse should be involved in. Sports is at the center of a lot of activity related to black boys and black men. Here's a list. Those who have the brochure have a similar list. The intersections are profound. They're deep, and they're important for us to think about. So as we think about all of those intersections, there are a number of things that we imagined that we could do in that context. We know that there are some very important things that we should be engaging in and analyzing. There are some stories to be told. There are things like this and things like, what folks have, I think, come to hear is that 85% of athletes are broke 5 years after they retire, right? Those are the kinds of things that we ought to understand. What are the systems in place that make, or systems in place that either promote that or prevent more success, right? Let's understand the whole industry. in better ways. Let's understand the youth, what's happening with youth. If you look at the AAU and how pro sports engage communities, what does that do to communities? How is that played out? So there are lots of very interesting questions that we ought to be asking, that a Morehouse ought to be engaging in. Given that sports plays a role in so many lives of black boys and black men, how can we use this as a tool? How can we use sports as a tool for reaching their own aspirations? Seeing the full breadth of opportunities, whether it's law, health sciences, any of the other ways that one might engage. How can you use a love and interest in sports to activate interest in other areas, to use that to effectively support students reaching their aspirations? And then lastly, how can we change what's going on in the industry? If you look across the sports industry, if you look at journalism, if you look at marketing, if you look at law, if you look at management, every area of the sports industry, the professional sports industry, there are some really obvious absences of black boys and black men in those industries. How can we affect change by doing the analysis? How can we affect change by preparing our students in some interesting ways? How can we engage professional athletes? I think, these days there are far more athletes who go off to have a pro career, but don't finish their career. The stars, the top athletes, often don't finish their college careers. Can we provide some mechanism for engaging pro athletes? How can we be an interrupter to this going broke 5 years out? So we have some vehicles that we're thinking about for doing this. The primary vehicle is a sports scholars program. Right now we have a kinesiology program, and we have a journalism and sports program, and we have a number of other things that intersect with sports already on our campus. What we want to use is a scholarship program to help activate some key things, experiential learning opportunities, things like participating in sports science labs more robustly. Of course, we'd like to have our own sports science lab, and to be able to do the kinds of things that we know, learning by doing, shadowing folks in the industry. So there are lots of things that we can do over the summers and throughout the academic year, connecting with Turner Broadcasting, connecting with ESPN. Lots of opportunities for folks to do real, hands-on, project-based experiential learning. So one of the key things that I'll say about this is that we know that we need to develop partnerships, key partnerships. That includes alumni. We have folks that are NBA refs. We have folks who are general counsel at pro teams. We have folks who are doing all kinds of really wonderful and great things in this industry, agents. So we should capitalize on all of those alumni and partner our students with those folks in some interesting ways. The kinds of question that would arise that we just saw the Kenny Smith and William Roden engaging in, those are the kinds of questions that we imagine coming up in the Morehouse Research Institute. And we want to make sure that we think about what's going on in many of our other initiatives that intersect sports. So the Morehouse Research Institute, we're going to talk a little bit more about later, so I'm not going to say very much there, but it is our vehicle for talking about interesting things that influence black men and black boys. And so we want to make sure that we intersect sports with the Morehouse Research Institute. And then finally, thinking about hybrid programs. These are online and in-place programs that could be designed for pro athletes, that could be designed for those who are connected in some way to the sports industry and want to engage in management, become maybe these are even students who have undergraduate degrees but want to engage in a way of breaking into a new area within sports. A lawyer who has been engaging in kind of traditional law wants to do something that intersects sports in some interesting ways. If we can bring together a community of both scholars and athletes to engage, we think we can do some pretty amazing things. So what can we do to get going? We know that we need to be in partnership with other folks, so we're going to be in talks with those. We're going to work to get MRI research and engagement reignited. We're going to have more conversations amongst ourselves and with others. But most importantly, we need to hear from you. What kinds of things do you think you can help us do within this initiative, either directly or by connecting us with folks? And then what would success in this area look like to you? How would you define success in this area? What does that look like, and how can you play a role in helping us be as successful as possible with this initiative?